What's going on, everyone? My name is Andrew. Welcome back to a brand new exciting video. Today we are doing something I'm pretty excited about. A few weeks ago I posted a video entitled editing your videos, in which I took videos that you submitted and I edited them. I know, shocker, but I thought it would be fun to do a part 2 of that video. You guys seem to really dig the last one. When I posted the first one, I had no idea. I kind of thought the video was gonna bomb, but you guys seem to really dig it, so I asked you guys a few days ago on Instagram to submit some of your clips, and I'm gonna take a look at them and edit them. Not too complicated. By the way, guys, do you hear this crispy new mic? Do you hear this crispy new mic? And check out this super cool editing keyboard. This has all the keyboard shortcuts for Premiere Pro. A company called Editor's Keys was nice enough to send me out these products along with some other stuff, including some products to do a giveaway with, so look forward to that. We'll probably talk more about this stuff in some future videos, but for now, I need to stay focused. I've rambled along quite enough, so be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, subscribe as well, and let's jump on the computer and start editing these videos. Alright, so the first clip that we've got coming in hot is this super cool rotating shot of these stairs. This clip is coming in courtesy of Colin Shia. I'm terrible at shooting low light, but this guy clearly knew what he's doing because this shot is super clean, really no noise at all, looks great. The first thing that I actually went ahead and did is inside Premiere, I chopped up the clip and then I exported out an XML. I brought that XML into DaVinci Resolve, which is my color grading software I've been using a lot lately, and I just used the scopes, messed around with the exposure, balanced the colors in the parade, brought some saturation in, and then dropped on one of my custom LUTs. After I did that, I went ahead and exported back out the XML and brought it into After Effects. So once I was inside of After Effects, I had a lot of different ideas going, but I thought these stairs right here, these glowing stairs, looked super cool, so I wanted to do something with that. The first thing I went ahead and did is I just tracked this whole clip right on through. That's always a good way to start, doing a 3D camera track. Then I created a solid right there on the stairs. After that, I added an adjustment layer. I drew a mask around the stairs. Then using the brightness and contrast effect, I keyframed this sort of flicker effect. I started off by doing 3 frames. Every 3 frames it would go up and down, but eventually I found out that was a little bit too slow, so I bumped it up to about 2 frames flickering on and off. Copy and pasted all those keyframes, and then I added in a hue saturation effect because when I darkened these stairs, there was like this green showing up, so I just bumped the yellow saturation and the green saturation all the way down, and then I adjusted the mask path a little bit. The next thing I went ahead and did is I added the RGB effect. I have a custom preset I made a while back, but essentially you just add this emboss effect, you add the tint effect, and then you make the whole layer linear light, and then you just mess around with the map black 2 and the map white 2, and then you can get some cool sort of colors going on. The color I sort of went with was this sort of purple-esque, and I thought that looked pretty sick. And then to sort of add to the whole feel of the rotating of the camera, I added another adjustment layer and added the radial blur effect. That was taking up way too much of the screen though. I wanted to sort of isolate it to the sides, so I added a circle mask and then inverted it and then feather that thing way up. Feather was the name of the game with this clip, man. Then the last thing I went ahead and did is I added in sort of these flickering, blinking bars. I used it for my beach edit. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you can see that. I made these actually a while back for my Anyone Can Create video, and I've sort of recycled them a couple of times now. I thought it sort of just added to the sort of flickering, glitching, trippy, sort of Stranger Things vibe of this clip. And yeah, that was about it for this clip. It was a lot of fun to edit. I love working with such a nice piece of footage like this. So here is the before, and here is the after. Alright, so moving right along, the next clip is coming in courtesy of Gabriel Moser. Gabriel said that he shot these with his cousin in Austria, and they look super sick. He sent in a few different clips, but the one I ended up going with was a shot of him sort of in an alleyway on a street in Austria, like I just said. And I had a few different ideas with this. I definitely knew I wanted to do a sky replacement. I couldn't really decide, and then I ended up deciding to try or attempt a day to night effect that was heavily inspired by one of Andreas Hem's vlogs. So the first thing I ended up doing was I tracked the background inside of Mocha Pro, just tracking those clouds in the background. And you guys might be thinking, why don't you use just a 3D camera tracker? Well, I tried that out, but the camera tracker wasn't picking up any information on the sky, so that's why I headed into Mocha. Mocha was able to pick up a pretty good track, so I brought it back into After Effects, and then I headed over to trusty Unsplash. Unsplash is a great free stock image website. They're great for getting stock images for really whatever you want, and they're completely free. great. I'll link the photo and the author of the photo down below if you guys want to check it out. After that, I parented that star layer to the sky track, and then I duplicated the bottom clip, so the base clip of Gabriel standing in the street, and then I used a Luma key to key out the sky and have the stars just be in the background. But as you guys can see, I had this rough sort of white outline that is a massive no-go when doing any kind of Luma keying, so I had to try to figure out a way to fix that. The way I went about it is with two life-changing effects inside of After Effects. You have to know about these. The first is Key Cleaner, and the second is Refine Hard Matte. As you guys can see, that cleaned up the issue right away. It took care of all the edge, so now we have a nice solid key. Those two effects come in clutch all the time. I highly recommend them. The next thing I wanted to do was sort of fade on the stars in the background. I wanted to start off in the day and end in the night, but if I used a Luma key effect, it just didn't look that cool or natural. It just sort of popped on, so I decided to use one of my ink transition backgrounds. You guys can download those. I have a tutorial on that. I'll link that down below as well. But essentially, I just added this ink AVI layer, and then I took the stars and I made them an alpha matte to the ink layer, so now they sort of just fade on in the background. It's pretty smooth. I think it looks better than if I tried to use a Luma fade, so I was pretty stoked on how it turned out. And now the next thing I had to do is I added an adjustment layer, and it was time to start messing around with the grading of the entire clip. Now this is the hard part. I was messing around with this for a while. I actually ended up watching some of my boy Aidin Robbins' tutorial on how to do day to night just to get a better idea of how to pull off this color grading. That's the thing, guys. I watch tutorials all the time. I feel like if I'm not learning something, I'm doing something wrong. So I was watching his tutorial because I'd never really done any kind of color grading to make day footage look like night, and that's something he's really good at. So I messed around with that tutorial and following what he said. I did all that inside of Red Giant's Colorista. Eventually, I got a look that I liked a lot, and now I really wanted to add like a fake light that would sort of fade on as it got darker. So I ended up using a track solid layer that I got from that previous camera track. I sort of masked it out and made the color white by using a change to color effect, and then I added the glow effect as well and feathered it up a bit. And then after that, it just wasn't looking that realistic, so I added a solid layer and added the optical flares effect from videocopilot.com. I went up into the options and I messed around with a few different options for the flare, but I ended up landing on this one right here with this nice soft glow that sort of shined down right on top of Gabriel. I pick whipped the flare to that null track, and there you have it. Now I've got this nice tracked layer. The next thing I did is I added a quick LUT, and I eventually ended up deciding to add the Red Giant Universe chromatic aberration effect. That adds that sort of distortion and RGB on the sides. This was a nice way to sort of wrap everything together and make it look sort of uniform. It's definitely sort of cheating, not gonna lie. It just blends everything together really nicely and makes that process really easy. So it's kind of cheating, but I think it definitely ended up helping the effect. After that, I just sort of faded everything on, and that was about it. So here is the before shot, and here is the after. So this next shot is coming from Denise Wooster. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, but thank you so much for sending in this super cool shot. The first thing I wanted to do is I knew right off the bat I wanted to replace that window with something. It was so perfectly white, easy to key out, that I knew I had to do something. I just wasn't sure what. So I actually headed over to Storyblocks and I started looking through some stock footage, eventually landing on this shot of this mountain with these clouds sort of rolling past. It looked pretty sick, and I thought the blue tones sort of matched that of the window. I dropped it right on into After Effects, and then I did a linear burn sky replacement. To do that, you start off with the base shot, and then you add the clouds on top of it, change the blending mode to linear burn, and then you duplicate the bottom shot, drag it to the top, and then change the clouds track matte to Luma. That sounds like a lot, but it's actually super simple, and you get some really nice keys a lot of times that way. After that, I just then realized that the shot was actually moving. I thought it was like a tripod time-lapse shot. It wasn't, so I ended up having to go ahead and warp stabilize it. And then I don't know if you guys know this, but if you go to warp stabilization and then you go to result, you can choose either smooth motion or no motion, and essentially what that's going to do is just lock it down like on a tripod. In Final Cut Pro, actually, I think it's called tripod mode. So yeah, that was super useful. It locked down the shot nice and tight, and it wasn't moving anymore. After that, I added an adjustment layer, did a bit of color grading, and then I also messed around with a bunch of different little lens flares, light leak fake type things. It took me a while to find the right one, but eventually I landed on it. And then the last thing I wanted to do is she was already a little bit sort of off center, and I wanted to sort of play on that. So what I did is I pulled up my proportional grid and I changed the dimensions to rule of thirds. If you guys want to do that, go up to edit, preferences, and then you can go to grids and guidelines, and then there you can go to proportional grid and you can just change horizontal to 3 and vertical to 3 as well, and that way you've got a nice rule of thirds all set up inside of After Effects. So then I just took the clip, shifted her over to be on the right axis, and then I filled in the background with a solid layer. After that, I pre-composed everything, I added a couple simple keyframes and just slowly scaled in. Overall, it was just such a cool shot. I loved it. Thank you so much for sending it in, Denise. Here is the before and here is the after. Alright, so this clip is coming from Aidin. Once again, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, but thank you so much for sending in your clip. He's from India and he's only 15 years old, and he sent me a whole bunch of beautiful footage. Couldn't edit all of them, so the one I ended up going with was this drone shot. I thought it looked super cool, and I actually only had a couple different ideas to tweak it just a bit. The first thing I wanted to do was add in some fake clouds. So what I did is I created a solid layer, and then I added the fractal noise effect. And then when I went over to the fractal type, I changed it to cloudy, and then I changed the noise type to spline. After that, I went down to the transform and just scaled it way up. I drew some rough masks about where I wanted the clouds to be, and then I feathered it up a ton. After that, I did a bit of color grading, nothing too fancy, just sort of dropping the shadows a bit, adding a LUT, and just changing a couple of the colors around. And then I wanted to do a nice sort of slow push in on the street down below. What I first did is I just pre-composed everything and just scaled it in, but it just wasn't looking quite right. So what I ended up doing is I used a 3D camera. I changed the views to 2 type, and I changed one from active camera and the other to top. And I changed the clouds layer and the bottom layer to 3D layers, and then I shifted the clouds forward in that 3D space and the base footage backwards. So in the 3D space, the clouds were actually farther forward than the clouds. Once I did that, I added a layer camera and I changed the focal length to 20mm. And then what you can see is when I'm pushing in with this camera, you can see there's actual real parallax. So the clouds, because they're closer to the camera in the 3D space, they're moving faster, they're scaling up faster than the city in the background. It's super subtle. Honestly, you probably wouldn't even notice it if you're not looking for it, but it just sort of adds to the realism of the clouds effect. So after that, I added a few different keyframes and just slowly pushed in, and here is the before and here is the after. So the last clip is coming in courtesy of Ryan Cost, and he sent me a few different really cool shots, but the one I ended up going with was this smoke bomb. I started off inside of Premiere, I cut up the clip how I wanted it, and then I exported an XML and brought it into DaVinci Resolve, and here's where I did the bulk of my work. I started off with my scopes and sort of just leveled everything out, balanced the exposure, balanced the colors, brought up the saturation, and sort of just made sure we had a solid base. On the saturation, you can see I used this vector scope, and right here you can see all of the information is clipping. That line right there is information being clipped, so I had to bring back the saturation. And then what I ended up doing is a bit of a color grade, but the problem I ran into was it was really important for me to get that hand skin color to be accurate. So what I did is I used a parallel node, and this is one of the most useful nodes in my opinion in DaVinci Resolve. What I can do is I was able to key out his hand, soften everything up, and then track it with a circle mask. And then on the top node, I was able to do my color grade, but in the final combining of those two different nodes, you can see that I've got the color grade on the background, but the hand skin tone wasn't affected at all. So we've got those natural skin tones in the hand, but we still have that nice, bold, strong color grade. And then after that, I brought it back into Premiere and then brought it into After Effects, and I added the time warp effect. I messed around with a few keyframes, and I ended up making the beginning really slow, using this sort of dramatic slow motion effect, and then having it fade back into real time after that. It was a ton of fun to edit. He shot it in a very nice picture profile. There was a lot of information in this clip. So here is the before and here is the after.